Where are they going to have to find a whole new method? That just seems cumbersome, right? Whereas to evade signals detection and heat detection is a little less cumbersome and a little less complicated. So I think it's going to take them a while, in my opinion, to figure that out, unless they have access to something I don't know about.
Yeah. You know, off this subject onto just the CIA in general, there's a lot of talk about how the CIA has, I would say, used some cartel members as assets. Mm-hmm. In your experience, is this something that is common practice?
I'm trying to figure out a way to answer that right without going into like sources and methods and protect them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to make deals with people that are unsavory characters for the betterment of our national security, or in this case, the war on drugs, right? And so I think, yes, because to my point earlier, what I discussed about penetrating some of these networks, particularly cartels, terrorist groups, those kinds of things, sometimes your best way in is through one of them. And that may not seem like a savory thing to do. It may seem uncomfortable. Sometimes it's the only way that we can get actionable human intelligence.
It's so this audience always attacks anyone who's CIA on the show.
So I want to acknowledge that and actually say that I agree to a certain point with individuals. So I'm not a CIA officer who's going to sit here and not take any criticism, right, of the CIA, because we absolutely, in my opinion, have done things that are wrong. But I think in terms of Mexico, obviously, I think our big picture is two things, right? Obviously, stemming the flow of fentanyl into the United States. I think that's probably issue number one. But I think issue number two, at least what it seems like from the current administration, right, is stemming the flow of immigration coming into the U.S. So I think that's probably the bigger picture, but I don't know for sure. Right. So like starting at the very base level of that, I do think that that's where some of that comes from. Now, let's just take the Sinaloa cartel, for example, just because I agree with you. It is probably one of the largest ones right now. I think part of the thing is if you just look at the cartels themselves, right, we know that those cartels, whether we want to admit it or not, do back certain people for president of Mexico. Right. We know that they back certain parties that are willing to take a hands-off approach. Let's just put it that way to them. I think you would agree with that. I think most people would agree with that. And so I think the CIA sees it from that perspective, not the cartel perspective. Who should be in power that will further our interests as a country from a national security perspective? And if it's the Sinaloa backing a president that we think from a national security perspective, right, is going to do what we want them to do, whether that's right or wrong, we are going to back that cartel because they are the ones then backing that. But it's no different, and I'm not saying this is right, but it's no different than if we look at Afghanistan, right, where we know opium is the largest export out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban is operating very much like a cartel in terms of how they are dealing with that. We backed that in the 80s, right? Because that, to us, was better than communism, was better than Russia. That is how we are looking at it. Now, it doesn't feel good to say that, right? But I think we have to acknowledge that. And so for us, because we didn't want Afghanistan to fall to the Soviets or fall to that communist ideology, even though the Taliban were war and drug lords, I mean, that's what they were doing, right? We still backed them. Obviously, that backfired on us 20 years later. We know that. But that's the same thing, in my opinion, that is going on with the cartels in Mexico. It's less about like the drugs and the cartels themselves and more about the politics that they support.